Well, I mean, I suppose this question is general, like globally speaking. The offshore is where you can also get most of energy, because this is where you can also get most of wind. I mean, the source is much higher on the offshore space.
Now let's talk about hydro energy. What advancements are being made to make hydro projects more sustainable and less impactful on ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, that's that's a big question. I mean, to harness hydro while being friendly to aquatic life and all that. But of course, it's all the time we said. I mean, run of river schemes. They can save both providing power, but also be mindful of the aquatic life and ecosystems. So it's not an innovation. It's not pretty much an advancement, because it's been there for quite some time. But I think running of river is a bit better, because you just divert a small section of the river section, and then you divert it back to the main cause of the river. So that could be one of the things that should be advocated, at least for the hydro systems. And the other one is to use of the existing systems, the so-called canal-based schemes. I've seen those in India, for example, when I went to visit somewhere in Uttar Pradesh. So they have the bigger irrigation schemes, so they take advantage of that. You use that, and also to generate also power using a low head turbine. I've also seen that in Austria as well, near Vienna. So that could be a way to go, so that you also get both other activities, but you also get power, but with less harm to the ecosystem. But the pump storage is an interesting one, because you can always create artificial head, the height difference, which actually provides potential energy through hydro systems. But that has to be created by pump storage. And the pump storage, of course, the downside is like you need to have surplus power at a particular point where you can fill in the dam and then generate power later on. But the biggest thing that I think she should be focused on now is having a multi-purpose scheme where you can have power systems that you put turbines to generate electricity and power. And then you have, at the same time, you can do irrigation systems. You can also do agricultural activities, also agro processing. But also you can also include the water supply, domestic water supply systems. So those, I think it should be the focus going forward, especially in the marginalized communities. Yeah.
Thank you. And the next one would be, can you discuss any innovative hydro projects that are setting new standards in sustainable energy production?
Well, I think I've just explained to the previous question, like the standards which you have hydro project which does not harm environment, but it also provides power and also integrates other users within the same scheme, so that you maximize the unit cost of say the water storage facility and waterways. So as I said, new standards should be set where the hydro system should be also multi-purpose schemes. You also have different activities provided through the same schemes, the same investment. Yeah.
How do you tackle challenges associated with large hydroelectric projects?
Well, you see, there are many ways of killing a cat. So that question, it requires a lot of thinking, because we have larger dams, larger dams in different parts of Africa, like like Ethiopia, for example, a licensed dam that is well known, and of course other countries actually they did follow suit. But I can tell you one thing, that from the technical point of view, I mean, being an engineer, then I can tell you for a fact, it is very challenging to have a big hydro system with a nameplate of X megawatt, and then the production to be X megawatt. It is very likely you will have X minus 50% of X megawatt as the actual production. So that's the biggest challenge. But of course that's on energy production. So the better way of addressing that is having multiple units, which actually many people have been doing that. So that economically speaking, it might be fine to design systems based on a few months of full capacity, as long as you have a client to sell the power. But if you are just depending on only a small, the same type of offtake, then it does not make any sense. So the better way from the technical point of view is to have multiple units where they can also respond to the available resources at a particular time. But again, the other problems is associated with the large hydro projects is about flooding. So I guess the design should also incorporate the flood control, whereby they can also include the other uses of electricity. Of water, to control the flooding, where they can also do some irrigation or water being accumulated for other uses. So it's pretty much about hazard control, appropriate energy generation, but also safeguarding the ecosystem. So they also need to design in such a way that fish migration, for example, should not be jeopardized. So those are the challenges, and all of those, they do add cost. So that's the major thing. Anything that is adding a cost, people look at it in many ways, and they are likely not to do it because of the cost.
Bringing the conversation closer to home, what recommendations would you give to Sri Lanka to enhance their renewable energy strategies?
Yeah, Sri Lanka, just as like many other countries, developing countries, looking at renewable energy strategy should be looked at it carefully. With my PhD in global energy policy, I question so many things, including why do we have to do this and not that? But of course, so in the same sentiments, so Sri Lanka should also look at things in a much more rational way. So the better way to do it is to do justice to do to people, and to try pretty much to do justice to the planet as well. So that said, that means they need to have a policy that allows for a transition, that is a gradual and smooth transition to renewable energy. That said, so to safeguard jobs and employment of the people in the non-renewable sector, as they prepare them to become renewable, to be part of the renewable energy ecosystem. Because you see, the issue with the renewable energy has a bit of specialized issues. The skills need to be specialized, which most of them do lack, especially in the local communities in the developing countries. So they need to look at these things and then have a short, medium, and long-term projections and trajectories when it comes to transitioning to renewable energy. So the strategy should also be should look at the current mix and how the current mix can support the transition to the renewable energy future. But it has to be smart, it has to be timed, it has to be also realistic. So this is, I mean, in a nutshell, without going into nitty-gritty, I guess I provided an overview of the entire aspect of transitioning from hydrocarbons to the renewable. And I guess Sri Lanka is not naive of that, and should actually pretty much look at that when they plan with their strategy. But of course, the strategy should also bring in key players into the equation, and private sector is central. So we see private sector as a bigger role to play rather than just the public sector. The public sector's role is to create necessary and enabling environment for the investments to trickle in, and for people to learn, and for business to thrive in line with the renewable energy progression. So that's pretty much my recommendation when it comes to that. Yeah.
Are there any specific renewable energy projects or models from other countries that will be implemented successfully in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I mean, as I said from above, I think the model of renewable energy projects could be community-based, but it also could be of a national type of projects. So the beauty of the community-based is, people share common interest. So those who are, like very far from the existing grid, they are better positioned to come together and define their energy needs. So that, speaking of energy, I also mean even clean cooking. And of course, e-cooking is one of them. And it could be the better way, especially if you have renewable energy generating electricity. So the community model is one. I mean, it's been very successful in so many places. And Sri Lanka, I'm sure, could also use that if something that is not existing yet. But I think is to also have a good framework for bringing IPPs, the private sector. If you talk about the larger power systems, then it's the duty of the government to create better incentives for the private sector to come in. And that incentives could not only speak about giving them money, but also creating better tariff, for example, good regulation where they can always question things that they're not comfortable with. So there has to be a level playing field to bring the private sector into play. So community-based could be those communities form their own cooperatives, for example, those in the rural areas. But if you talk about the national space, I guess the IPP is one of them. But sometimes, as I said from the beginning, PPP model could also be very useful, especially in areas where private sector is not very comfortable to invest alone. So the government also should be part of the risk equation, and this is where you can also do the PPP. And I'll say, in those areas where the government thinks should still maintain the state because of sensitivity of the things, of the situation. But it's the duty of the government again to evaluate exactly what model could work best, if it's PPP model, or it's pure private, or or community-based systems.
How important is the community engagement in these projects, and what are the best practices that can be implemented?
Well, as I said from the beginning, I mean, the community engagement means integrating the community voices into the project design. Because traditionally, we have been seeing donor-driven projects being top-down. So someone sits in Europe, in wherever, maybe not in Europe, somewhere in the city, and then decides for someone at the rural area, just to find that, the model doesn't work for them. I can give you one example. For example, you can say, well, people should be paying this amount of money per unit. People are saying, well, I mean, unit doesn't work here. Why don't you give put a quota? So those spending up to that, they should be paying this much. Or, I mean, the payment modalities again. We say, well, we have the prepaid meters, they're the best. Fine, they're the best. But perhaps it doesn't work in some of the rural communities because people their income is very seasonal. So there has to be a flexible model where people can accumulate their debt and then they pay it, twice a month, twice a year. That's the something that the rural community wants. So what I'm saying is, once you do engage the community, it's possible then to identify and fine-tune the project accordingly so that it does not fail. It does not fail in terms of financial merits, but also in terms of delivering the service that is intended to the community.
What role do you see in international collaborations play in enhancing sustainable energy projects?
I mean, collaboration in everything is everything. You need to collaborate. But specifically for the international stakeholders, they should not only end about blaming about hydrocarbons. They should also know that they have a duty to support the developing nations to transition. And because we are living in the same universe, it's not like someone lives in somewhere else. And there could be a better way of doing it in a win-win fashion so that one does not free ride on the other. So financing is key. Developing world, say sub-Saharan Africa countries are very poor. They cannot afford to do some fancy things. Talking about renewable could be fancy for them. And the technology transfer, south-north collaboration is key. We have to transfer technology from one point to the next. Like now, you are asking about Sri Lanka to borrow some ideas from other countries. This should be the way to go. And then government should make particular efforts to get to know what's happening elsewhere and then exchange. I think the era of seeing people jumping into planes and attending seminars without doing something substantive is over. And actually the same noises have been made quite a lot in Baku recently at COP29. But I guess if we feel climate change is real, if we feel climate change abatement is the duty of everybody, then we have to see who does what. We cannot afford to ask somewhere in Sahel, a country in Sahel is struggling with electrification of 10% across the country, to do the same thing that as one of the countries, in the northern Africa, where they have 100% electrification rate. So we cannot afford to to ask a country with a GDP of $10,000 per capita with a country with a GDP of $500 per capita. So there has to be a common goal but differentiated role. This was also said back in conversation. So the collaboration should be with a common goal but with a differentiated role. This is my message when it comes to that.
Finally, what message do you like to convey policymakers in Sri Lanka to enhance renewable energy policies in Sri Lanka?
I mean, the message I want to give to the policymakers, it's they cannot afford to be reactive. Renewable energy is coming. I mean, it's happening. So it's a duty of the government to create policies to be ready to accommodate the changes. There are a lot of things that are happening. If you are not careful, we might find ourselves as a field for people to just do their research and they go. So just to be proactive, not to be reactive. And we also need to embrace research, design and development, but also train our people. There's nothing like local knowledge. We cannot afford to depend on imported knowledge. So we need to create our own knowledge locally. Of course, taking advantage from the international community. But with a lot of technological advancement in terms of ICTs, in terms of whatever, then it's possible to be proactive. But again, we cannot afford to sideline private sector, but we have to be careful on how we engage them because they might be having some different interest. But we have to acknowledge that they need to make money because they are there to make money, but they need to serve our people. And the people should be served in a very rational way. And the transition to the renewable has to be just. As I said, it has to do justice to the people, but again, being mindful of the justice to the environment and the planet. So thank you very much.
For Sri Lanka, this provides fine opportunities to take decisive actions. By investing in renewable energy projects, the country can enhance energy security, create jobs, and reduce carbon footprint.